"The time has come," the walrus said, "to talk of other things, like shoes and ships and sealing wax and cabbages and kings." Or so the poem goes among the many in the Lewis Carroll tales of Alice and her adventures in Wonderland. Another instance of that line is from the TV show that is a favorite among generations, the TV show I Love Lucy. It's a little before my time. Actually, it's a lot before my time. But inarguably, perhaps the most watched episode was the episode in which little Ricky was born. And Ricky and Fred and Ethel were preparing for that moment, exactly what everyone would do at that moment when, as Ricky pictured it, Lucy would come out and say, "The time has come." In today's gospel, we hear, "The time has come." And the gospel, according to John, is divided into two main parts, along with a prologue and an epilogue. And these two parts are called the Book of Signs and the Book of Glory. And the gospel reading from today in chapter 12 marks the virtual halfway point of the two halves of the Gospel of John, a transition between the Book of Signs and the Book of Glory. By this point in John's Gospel, the disciples have been called, the wedding at Cana has been celebrated, the temple has been cleansed, the centurion's son has been cured, the woman caught in adultery has been spared, Jesus has had conversations with both Nicodemus and the woman at the well. He's multiplied the loaves and fishes, walked on water, and given his discourse on the bread of life. Both the paralytic and the man born blind have been cured and then left to their own devices to offer testimony of their experience of Jesus and that cure. And finally, Lazarus has been risen from the dead, and his sister Mary, in gratitude, has anointed Jesus' feet. Now, as the Book of Signs wraps up, and the Gospel of John flows into the Book of Glory, Jesus now sets his sights on preparing for that glorification. And in what appears to be a bold proclamation, he declares repeatedly the importance of his hour. And we hear this all throughout the Gospel of John, but a number of times in this passage. The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. What should I say? "Father, save me from this hour"? It is for this that I came to this hour. After 11 chapters of Jesus revealing himself to his disciples, he is now preparing for that big moment of his final glorification as the Son of God. And what does that glorification entail? Jesus again gives the answer. He will be glorified in his death on the cross. He says, "Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains just a grain of wheat." But here Jesus doesn't just profess his death. He doesn't just preach his impending crucifixion. He also begins to preach what it truly means to be his disciple and to follow in his footsteps. "Whoever loves this life will lose it, and whoever hates his life in this world will preserve it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me." Until now, it's only been a series of signs. Both Jesus' detractors as well as his disciples were drawn because of the signs that he was performing up to now. They were directed by his forerunner, John the Baptist, to follow him. They were mystified by his changing of water into wine. They were intrigued by his analogies of being a shepherd, of being the light and being the life. They were fired up by his cleansing of the temple, scandalized by his Sabbath cures, moved to shame by his treatment of the woman caught in adultery, and emotionally touched by his weeping at the tomb of Lazarus. He inspired the woman at the well to bring her fellow townspeople for a look-see, and he drew Nicodemus to a clandestine tete-a-tete in the middle of the night. And he drove away all but 12 of his followers by his strange insinuation that his flesh and blood were somehow food and drink. But now Jesus declares the time has come when he will give the one great example of glory and what it means to be his disciple. From this point on, in the Gospel of John, all his actions and words are directed toward his eventual death and resurrection and the call of his disciples to follow in his footsteps. Immediately following today's Gospel, he will wash his disciples' feet, showing them that they must be dedicated to a life of self-effacing servitude that has no parallel in any ancient story of any mythological hero. He'll prepare them for his departure, assuring them of his purpose in leaving them. He will declare true love as being true to his word, and that laying down one's life for one's friends is the greatest of that love. And he will command his followers to love one another as he loved them. And even after his resurrection, he will indicate the sort of death by which Peter is to glorify God after he commissions Peter 3 times to feed his sheep. That's what's to come as he directs everything toward his glorification and the implications for all of his followers. But at this point in the Gospel, we have the linchpin, the interlude, the connection between the book of signs and the book of glory, in which he says, the time has now come for the Son of Man to be glorified. And in just a few passages later, after he commands Judas to go about his business, Judas departs and Jesus raises his eyes to the heavens and says, now is the Son of Man glorified. So we come very much to a turning point that binds together both halves of the Gospel of John. The time has come.